Hey, what's up, GFFL? Welcome to another Bobcast. Finally, getting to one here just a couple days before the start of the season. I thought this was a big one. We did the preseason one where I made some predictions and some things like that just for fun. Well, now the draft has happened. Now, like, all the teams have taken shape a bit, and we can start to talk about things and get excited for the upcoming season. Football's finally here. Let's hope it stays throughout and no craziness happens. It appears that, considering the other sports got it done, I assume the NFL will find a way to get it done as well. Um, I did say in the last time I did this that I was gonna do this more. Like, I felt like I'd been slacking the last couple years, and hopefully this is a little further proof that I'm gonna do that. I don't think it's gonna be a weekly thing or even a bi-weekly thing, to be honest. I think it's going to be more of a, maybe once a quarter, every 3-4 weeks, something like that. Kind of reassess, take a look at some predictions, and I would like to do what we used to do, and maybe see if we could get different members of the league to join us. Hopefully, Whitus is able to do this with me. It kind of makes it easier, get a couple people's feedback rather than just one person. And as always, I just do this for fun. It's because I love the league, and it's just, I'm a nobody. I don't sit here for hours and scour over stats and anything. It's just kind of my personal opinions when I put any of this stuff together. So I was able to work with Whitus and get his schedule. Whitus is in here with me. We're gonna go ahead and tackle this thing together.
Hey, what's up, man? I'm happy to join. I'm glad, honored that you asked me. I think you said you asked me because I was the best owner. Is that the was it? Wasn't sure if that was your exact words, but
Yeah, something like
um,
that.
yeah, I'm happy to jump on with you, man.
Cool. So we're gonna these are I made a quick outline. These are the things that I was gonna briefly talk about. I'm gonna talk about the off season. There was just something that I was thinking about, and I just wanted to throw it out there. Wanted to discuss draft day a little further, um, and then we'll get into more of the meat and potatoes part of the thing where we actually, so like the draft day surprises, the draft grades, and any predictions that are done. Whitus and I have not talked about it, so like I don't know what he's gonna say. He doesn't know what I'm gonna say. In the past, we've kind of tried to put it together and make it to where each other knew a little bit more of what was going to be said. And this time we're just kind of going for a surprise and seeing how it works. So yeah, we're going to talk about the biggest draft day surprises, draft grades. I have some odds and ends that I wanted to discuss. And then I was going to review the previous predictions that I made in the first time that we did the Bobcast. And then I was going to do some post draft predictions. And then we're going to take a look at the week one matchups and predictions there. So this was, from what I could remember, and Whitus, maybe you can chime in here too. Well, first of all, this is the first time that we ever got two new players in the same season in the keeper league era. Like, we've had
Yeah.
one guy here, one guy there, but never twice in one season.
Hey, just a heads up. I gotta apologize. You could probably hear my dogs. I'm gonna try to stay on mute, but they're kind of going bananas in the background. But yeah, this is definitely the first time that we've had two, at least since we've done the keeper league. Like maybe back in the day, the we should almost do like BL and pre BL or something. I don't know. I got to stop thinking off the top of my head because those acronyms didn't even work.
Uh,
But yeah, it was first time we're getting two new players.
and then I was just sort of thinking, and this is not limited to just the three names that I have on this slide. I think that there's been three different ways we've seen this approached, as far as like you're coming into a league and you don't really know what to expect, and you can get some information, which I'm sure Frank got a lot of his information from me. I've known Frank for years now, and I've been talking about my league for years, so he's probably soaked in some of the stuff that I was saying prior to ever being in. And then Matt, I'm sure Matt talked to the Boozies or Hoover or somebody, and they kind of gave him a little bit of a rundown. And then I threw Eric's name on here as well. The main point that I was making is, like, we've seen people do this all different ways now. And I would say Frank's approach was very much like Whitus's approach, where Frank was very active in the offseason and made a bunch of trades and really made the team his own. Uh, and Allen did sort of the same thing too. Allen has always been very active in the trade side of things. So that's what Frank did, and then you take a look at Matt's approach, and he took a more quiet approach. Now both of these teams, I think you have to take into consideration of where they sit. Frank's team is a few stages ahead of where Matt's team is. So Frank had some players that he could move around and even move some picks around, and then was able to get some picks back. Where Matt had that number one overall pick. I don't think that, and his roster wasn't super strong. I'm sure he could have put something together that might have enticed somebody, maybe got another pick here or there. But Matt took a quieter approach, which I don't want to necessarily think that either way is right or wrong. Where if it were me, like I wouldn't want to mess with that pick, right? Like that's my pick. I'm keeping that. Like that's my way to get that one player that I can begin to build around. As I mentioned, Matt started with much less than what Frank did, and just took a quiet approach. And I think probably doing a lot of like soaking everything in, trying to figure everything out. I know just from personal experience, just jumping from this league into a regular redraft league or an IDP league, I'm sort of lost because I am just so this league is everything that I know when it comes to fantasy, really. So like I'm sort of lost when I do anything different, and I can't expect that other people don't jump into here and they're kind of wondering what the hell's going on. And then I threw Eric in there because he tried. Eric did things, I think, the third way that we've seen it, and Eric didn't do much early. And he tried to roll with the team he had, and then later realized, like, okay, this isn't my style. This isn't my team that I wanted. And then he made draft pick or trades and things later. So, you got anything to say on that?
Yeah, I remember when I first came in, I wanted to have like I was in for the long haul like right away. So I knew that the players that I kept, I wanted to love everybody on my roster. So just being handed a team, even though it wasn't like a complete bottom of the barrel type team, there wasn't necessarily a lot of individual players that I wanted for years. So I thought I came in pretty aggressive. I think Allen kind of blew me away with how aggressive you could possibly be. Even as an aggressive person in trades, Allen was like uber aggressive. But I think looking back on my first year, I think I only had one player by the end of the year that I started with pre-draft, and that was Ben Roethlisberger. But I think I flipped my entire roster. All the other players. It might have been one or two other. I was trying to think about it the other day, and I couldn't. And I also came in with the number one pick, so I kind of had that in common as well. But I remember just packaging a lot of guys together. And then the other thing that I wanted was because I came in with the approach that I didn't have a team that could compete right away. At least that was my assumption. I tried to go really young, so that was another reason why I think I flipped so many players.
Yeah, and I guess maybe I should have talked to Matt or Eric more for that matter. I kind of leave it to guys that know these guys better to kind of give them a rundown. I almost should like put together a packet or something explaining things from because I think you're right, and I think it ended up working out for you. You made a bunch of moves, and
What was the result of my first? Sometimes I forget what was the result of my first season.
I believe you won the Super Bowl.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
Yeah, and so I'm sure Frank is hoping for those same results as well as he came in and made a bunch of moves. I just think it's tough. Like I said, I think it's very hard to step into a pre-existing situation and be like, okay, this is what we do, and have an idea of what you want to do. Like I said, I'm very aware at this point that Matt's roster was a much lesser roster than I think. I think if anybody's in full rebuild mode, it's probably that team. So the fact that he took it over and took more of a quiet approach, we'll see where he comes from. The word on the street is when I talked to Rich Boozy, about getting Matt into the league and Hoover as well. Everything I've been told was that he's a competitive guy and he's gonna bring it. He wants to win. So, I definitely am not knocking any approach here because I personally don't know what I would do as I've never had to do it. If it's anything like my normal approach to fantasy, I would be very conservative and probably be more on the fence of where Matt was rather than where Frank was. But um, So
Yeah, I think over time it'll be interesting when we have like a little bit more data to be, it's one thing to pick like one person here, one person there, but after multiple years to be like, oh, generally the people that are more conservative have go have like more stats to kind of view
yeah,
what might ultimately work best.
very true. All right, so that was about all I wanted to say on that. It was just so in addition to having two new players for the first time in the keeper league era, the this off season was pretty active. Not just Frank, but Alan made some deals, you made some deals, I made some deals. So there was definitely some pawns being moved around the board here, and we're just a couple days away from getting it all fired up. All right, draft day. Now we did chat about this briefly on the sleeper app, and this isn't something that we need to make a decision on now, but over the course of the year, I would love to hear from everybody. Give me a call, we can chat, or send me an email, shoot me a text, whatever. Doesn't matter. And we did talk about it briefly. So here was my sort of, I guess, reasoning behind all this. For one, I the anticipation of draft day always gets to me. I'm always super excited. I wake up in the morning on draft day and I'm like, oh, got a draft today, no matter if it's 10 hours from now or 2 hours from now. So as the day was approaching, I did think about that all day sort of draft event for a couple reasons. One, I thought it would be exciting to get it going. Two, I did do it one other time, but it was more of like a very casual, like family league, and I didn't want anybody getting overwhelmed with a timer or anything like that. So I thought it was something that we could try. Um, Now, keep in mind, back in the day, like before Keeper, before, like when I started this whole thing, there were some rules that were in place that are no longer in place. Like, one, like if you couldn't physically make it to the draft, you couldn't be in the league. Like, I always felt like that was like a big camaraderie piece. Like, let's get everybody together. It's once a year, it's one weekend. Like, who cares? We all get together, and that was the days that you hear about this epic wiffle ball game we had and these horseshoe tournaments and all the like the Madden, and I think somebody had to draft with their pants around their ankles for the first 3 rounds because they lost a Madden bet. Like we had some fun times back in those days, and I think that was prior to a lot of you guys. Like I think that was prior to Rich Boozy. I think that was prior, definitely to Eric and yourself.
Prior to me, I
Yeah.
never had no watching anybody draft with that. I think I would remember that.
Yeah. So, that was always kind of the rule, and we drafted in like the early afternoon. Like I want to say we started at 4 or 5 o'clock, and because everybody would get there during the day, like show up at like noon, and we would play horseshoes and have a good time, and then we would draft, and afterwards we all stand around looking at the draft board, talking about who drafted well, who didn't draft well, all these things. And I guess when I initially made the time of 7:30 p.m., I kind of had not intentionally resorted back to that old time frame. But then I think it might have been you, Whitus, or somebody brought up like, well, we had been drafting in in the afternoons, like or even in the morning, like when we drafted in Vegas, like a few years ago. I think it was like noon or something, right? Like so, which was 9 a.m.
Yeah, it was noon for the East Coast guys. Yeah.
All new for the East Coast. So yeah, it was. You know what I mean. So I'm not sure exactly where my head was at and why I decided all this change, but I did want to briefly talk about it. And then I know you and I kind of shared a different opinion, at least at first, and then you can talk about your side. So the things I did like the fact that it a couple things. One, that we did get it moving. It was moving. There was no really pressure. Uh, and everybody could sort of go on about their business and go on about their day, and it didn't seem to become a burden to anyone. And at the same time, that's the thing that I ultimately sort of grew to hate a little bit, is I'm sitting there staring at the board all day, waiting for that next pick, even if I'm 20 picks away. Like it didn't matter. I guess. So I did like that it was kind of carefree and just sort of flowed and went about the day. But at the second time, at the same time, I did not like the fact that it lasted like 12 hours or 10 hours. I think it was a 10-hour event in all told, something like that. So, yeah, just kind of throw your thoughts in there on that.
Well, I'll say I need to almost like apologize because I went in um, by my own mistake. I didn't realize that the official start of the draft time was 7 p.m. And maybe I have brain damage. Maybe me and you previously talked about it. Maybe I seen it. Maybe I forgot about it. But going into the draft, I had no idea that was the case. And when you had said like, "Oh, we're going to open it up with no row clock," I'm like, "Oh man, that's going to be miserable for somebody like me because like I'm the guy that stares at the draft board from the moment that first pick goes off. I can't stop looking away." So like that 12-hour draft thing, I literally had it up on my monitor for 12 straight hours and was watching, and I seen every single draft come off the board or every single pick
Right.
come off the board. When I realized that no, the draft started at 7 or whatever it was, but that pre-time was just to get ahead of the game. I completely like get that, and I'm also split on it. Like I think that it's a great idea. I also know that it personally sucks for me because I don't care if we said we're gonna open it up a week before. I'm gonna have that damn thing open for a week, staring at the board every second. So I think that whatever the start time is, I like an open window before just to casually get ahead of the game. But I also know that it's personally going to kill me the entire time. So, hey, one other thing I meant to chime in earlier, we'll get right back to the draft day, but you had mentioned an active off season. And I think that this was the first off season that we were able to have like live trades and see them immediately incorporated into the team. Previously, we'd have to say like, "Oh, I will trade you this guy for those 2 picks,"
Oh
and the
yeah.
moment that the draft starts, then those trades will become live. But with the incorporation of the keeper or the sleeper app and the website that we use, having those trades just immediately active to me, it felt great. I loved it.
That's a great point, and that actually something that I did miss as well. You and I made a draft day trade. Like that's never happened before
Sure.
because we were
Yeah.
never able to do it because of the website, like you just said, that we used to use. Sleeper was great. I mean, you flipped
Seamless.
those
Yeah.
picks and it flipped it right on the board like instantly. It was really awesome. So it's very nice to think about in the future that all we really have to do is set the board up, and everything else will take care of itself.
Yeah. 100%.
And then back to the draft day. Yeah, I'm the same. I was sitting there staring at that board, and I love the fact of not having a clock. And honestly, Rich Boozy said it the best, I think, because I joined Rich's league this year. He had a couple guys back out late looking for some people. I was happy to join his league and be a part of that. And he sent a message prior to their draft, and he said that he personally didn't like to put a clock on things, and the reason being was that this is one day a year. We do this one time. Like, is it really that big of a burden to sit there? And the answer is no. He's absolutely right. Like, it is a fun day for me. Like, I remember, my wife usually makes me special treats on that day, and I get like chips and dip, and like I'm just sitting here in like the war
That's
room.
cute.
Yeah, it's cool. So, it's I didn't mind, I guess, that it took all day. I just hate that sometimes there were times where there was 40 minutes between picks. Like that seems excessive. So although I'm not like in favor of a clock by any means, I kind of throughout the season want you guys to think about this in general, and just do we try that again next year? Do we just say, hey, 9 a.m. it opens up and we you know get it done that day? Do we add a clock? Maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and just say, hey, look, we're going to add a clock just to make sure we get it done. I definitely think starting it in the evening is a mistake. I think starting it in the morning is almost a necessity. Plus, with the sleeper, it seems like you can just do it right on your phone. Like it's an app. It's made to work right on your phone. Like you can be at the grocery store and picking. Like you don't have to be in front of the computer. I choose to be in front of the computer, but um, and then, yeah, the last bullet I had was just kind of how it was back in the day, which I already described, that it was sort of more of an evening event.
I mean, while I have the opportunity, I'll just give my 2 cents on potential things that we do in the future. I think at some point we should put a clock. Like, and honestly, I think it worked out really, really well, especially for the guys that live further. Just to give you guys a heads up, anything like east of Texas, I call the East Coast. So if you're in Oklahoma, you're like the East Coast to me. So anybody on the East Coast, it seemed like it could potentially get later in the night. So I think at some point putting a clock, I think, is a good idea. I also would like to open up the idea of making that open window even bigger. We were joking around the night before. The three guys that had like the first three picks were like, well, I know who I'm going to pick first. Well, I know who I'm going to get second if you get that guy first. And then even Frank chimed in with the third pick. I mean, I don't know what would be all that terrible about opening it up, the night before or 24. I don't know. Just throwing it out there as something to think about over the next 365 days.
Yeah, well, that's yeah, for sure. I think that we can open it up essentially whenever we want, right? I mean, there's nothing stopping us from doing that. Now, not that I want to turn it into a multi-day event, but I did briefly think about the NFL draft and what they do, that it's a 3-day thing.
Right.
Do maybe Friday night I open it up for the first 2 rounds, and then we kind of recess. I mean, that would take.
It's interesting. I think it's dope. I mean, to me, like anything that more resembles being an NFL owner, be like, yeah, just like the real NFL.
Yeah.
Like, there's just something like the little kid part of my brain that just makes me feel good.
Well, a couple things that I did think about, and then I don't know if it would work or, then you're really kind of piecing it together, right? Like you got a couple rounds, and you have say you have 2 picks, and they're both pick 11 in first and second round, whatever. Who's to say maybe your draft in those first 2 rounds went horribly? Well, now you have a whole day to think about it. Maybe you're like, you know what, I need to move up. I really there's one guy on this board that I need to get, and I'm not going to get him if I can't move up. Well, now maybe you package something together and you decide to move up the next day, or try to move up and do a different position. It could create a more of a GM like feel, which is always something that I get comments about in this league, about just how fun it is to like be in trade talks on trade deadline day and things like that. Has always been I've always heard good things about that. So I did think about that, and yeah, you're right. We can open it whenever and be wherever, but maybe you're right. Maybe we say, hey, look, we're going to open this thing at 9 a.m., but come 3 p.m. if we're not done, we're going to put a 5-minute clock on. Because at least at that point, we're halfway through, and we say, everybody just needs to buckle down and get it done. But I'd be interested to hear anybody else's feedback too. Like, do you have a good idea? Any of the ideas we said, do you think those would work or be good ideas? Just let us know. All right, here we go. Next part. So I did these in 3 separate slides, and I made some notes here, and I think Whitus has some as well. Now, mine are only in order of how they happened, not in any other order. It's not like one's the worst, three's the best, or anything like that. These are just sort of in the order of how they happened. So my first biggest draft day surprise was at pick number 8 when Tim took Jarvis Landry. I personally thought that Tim's biggest need was at running back. So taking a wide receiver with that first pick sort of threw me off. Now, I get it. A lot of running backs had been taken prior to that moment that I think that could have potentially been more of a, best available situation without reaching for a back that, who knows what you're getting sort of thing. So I did after that take a look at wide receivers that were drafted after Jarvis. And it's not like you're getting a super young guy. He's not old by any means, but it's not like you're getting a second-year player that you're hoping to stash for many years. And let's be honest, I mean, Jarvis has bounced from team to team to team for, I think, probably the last 3 or 4 years. Like, nobody's really kept him. But here are just a handful of receivers that were taken after Jarvis Landry. McCole Hardman, in probably the best offense in football. A.J. Green, which we all know what comes with that territory. I mean, we might have turf toe for the next 4 years, so who knows about that. Jerry Jeudy and Henry Ruggs, those are 2 rookies that were out there that, like, man, in Boozy's situation, he's not really in rebuild mode anymore. I mean, he spent the last few years building himself into what he is now, as well as Justin Jefferson. But to have another young receiver, and maybe Tim's plan was much more advanced than this, and he's like, look, I need a guy that's going to produce right now for sure, because maybe he feels like he's on the doorstep and ready to move to the next level. But those are just a few examples of why, like, that was the first pick on the board that sort of threw me off. That I was like, wait a minute, I think I personally don't think I would have done that.
Yeah, I think Jarvis Landry is like a real classic case of a high floor and not the highest ceiling, right? Some of those other guys, especially the rookies, have potentially a much higher ceiling, but also a much lower floor. So I think that this pick probably speaks a lot to how much Tim views his team at. You know, if you feel like you're in rebuilding mode, maybe you need to take a shot at a younger guy that could potentially be a stud. But if you feel like you just need to plug in a guy right now that's going to give you like a nice, solid, rounded out wide receiving core, then you know then you get a guy like Jarvis.
For sure. What was your what was the first one on your list, or do you want me to just keep rolling through mine and then you'll kind of add to
Well,
it?
I do have a little bit of an idea of who you're gonna your next couple. So go ahead and roll through your top three.
Okay. The next pick that threw me off was pick number 13. So that was the first pick in the second round. That was Matt Mongel taking Will Fuller there. Um, this is my personal opinion on Fuller. I not a big fan of his. I know he's had some massive games, but I've always kind of viewed him as more of a home run threat sort of receiver, not the guy that you're gonna look at and never take out of your lineup. You're gonna kind of look and see who they play and everything. And I'm sort of personally I'm worried the fact that I think it was easier for him to hit those home runs when D Hop was there, and now that he's gone, is Cook's going to be able to do that to give him the space, or is he just that fast, or is he going to be able to do it, or does he, maybe he ups his game a bit? I'm not sure. I personally think, as I said earlier, I think Matt's team is in full rebuild mode here. Like, there's no question about it. And in my opinion, there were many other options. I think that he could have went there. Um, and his team is just decimated at running back. I know he took Hilaire with the first pick, which I think was a great pick and the pick to make there. But then to come back and follow it up with a round two, somebody like Fuller, yeah, kind of a head scratcher for me.
Yeah, to his credit, his following pick was Justin Jeffries, who you just mentioned on the previous slide,
Mm-hmm.
as being like a nice wide receiver that you could have got at that point. I think Will Fuller will be really interesting to watch this year, as you mentioned, with Hopkins moving away. It's the classic situation of that number two guy. Was he always a number one and just in the shadow of the superstar? And now it's his opportunity to show the world that he's the number one, or at least a bigger role. Or did he only get those looks because the number one guy was taking the attention of the entire defense? Personally, I think that might be the case. I'm not the biggest Will Fuller fan either, but the whole high ceiling, low floor thing really applies to Fuller because he can hit a few of those huge passes that gives you a great week.
For sure. Yeah. So I don't know. I owned Fuller. I want to say a few years ago, and I think I just left feeling like, like that guy's so hard to predict. What do I get out of him one week to the next? And I kind of like consistency, but sometimes we need that home run threat to push us over the top. So that pick, and you're right. Once again, I thought Matt should have went running back there, being that he only had Montgomery and then Hilaire. I get it. We only start two. I felt there were some other guys out there, some young guys that I thought he could have grabbed, or even some guys like I think obviously AP in this situation. Not that you want to grab him there in the second round, I guess supposedly, but I don't know. It was just sort of the first thing that or the second thing that jumped out to me on the draft board. And the last of my three would be Hoover. And we've seen Hoover do this before. But Josh was only one of, I think, two GMs that did not keep a quarterback.
Two of the smartest, but yeah, well, I'll talk about that later.
So, and then we see Hoover, and there were plenty of options there. Now, I'll give you this: a lot of those options I think fall right within that same realm, and they're all going to score roughly about the same. So I don't think you need to necessarily reach out and grab one super early, but I did feel like round 8 was excessive. And we've seen Hoover do this before, all the way back to where the last live draft we had here at my house. I think Hoover and Boozy and Bill, Rich Boozy that is, all kind of did the same thing. They didn't have quarterbacks, or Bill actually had a quarterback and was just sort of pushed the quarterback envelope by, I think he took Cam. one year, and then it sort of forced Rich and Josh to fight over the next couple good ones that were there. But yeah, I think this time Hoover kind of really pushed his luck here. 10 quarterbacks were taken prior to Hoover grabbing one. So that's there were 10 teams that kept at least one. Allen kept two. So there were 11 quarterbacks off the board already to start, and then 10 were taken before that. Like that, 21 QBs of the 32 teams are gone. I feel like his roster is the weakest quarterback combination of all 12 teams easily. The injuries that Bridgewater had in the past scare me that he's a number one. I know he played really well in New Orleans for a brief period of time, but everybody talks about Sean Payton and how he's just sort of a genius with quarterbacks. And, part of me is always wonders how much does that play into the whole thing. I think it's pretty obvious that Jacksonville is in full tank mode to get Trevor Lawrence, so I think that was in reference to him taking Minshew as his backup. So, I mean, you have Teddy Bridgewater, whose leg could literally fall off the next time he gets hit, and Gardner Minshew, who I don't think they're going to move the ball much at all. I don't really think they want to. So, yeah, like that was kind of really weird to me unless Hoover has something else going on. Now, we all know Hoover's team is nasty. He's still got that wide receiving core. He's still got really good running backs. Maybe he can get by without it. But that was probably my third surprise.
Yeah, and I'm kind of glad you ran through your first three because my biggest surprise was Hoover and his quarterback situation. Now, I usually take a very similar approach. I rarely keep quarterbacks, and I like to just. I feel like there's more, generally speaking, there's more than 10 decent quarterbacks in the NFL league. So I always feel like I'll be able to pick one up in the draft pretty early on. Now it has bit me a couple times. I think it was the year after I had won the championship. I got a little cocky. I didn't keep a quarterback. It might have been the year after that, but I felt like I had like a really solid squad, tons of good like wide receivers, running backs, that type of things. Mm-hmm. But then I waited like one round too long, and there was a run on quarterbacks, and then all of a sudden I was left with like Blake Bortles or something like that. Mm-hmm. And it really hurt me throughout the year. I was constantly getting beat at the quarterback position significantly, and I think that could happen to Hoover's team because, as you mentioned, the rest of his team is stacked. But I think that he waited too long. And at this point, when you actually end up selecting a quarterback, he got a super risky quarterback in Bridgewater. And everything that you just said about Minshew, personally, I love the dude as a person, but I think Jacksonville is straight up like they're trading away everybody at this point to get that number one pick. So yeah, I think Hoover waiting on quarterback was to me the biggest surprise out of the draft. Second to that was another similar situation. Well, similar in the sense that it wasn't one specific pick. Like, the 13th pick was very surprising to me. But was it Eric that went 5 straight rounds with just getting running back after running back after running back? It was like it started to build like, he went back to back with running backs. Oh, snap, he did it 3 straight rounds. And then by that 4th round, I'm like, let's see if it happens again, And then by round 5, I'm like, oh, shit. So that was the other one. And I don't think it's inherently good or bad. It was just something of note that as the draft was unrolling, that was just something that I was focusing in on. And to me, those 2 things kind of stood out above like a third one. Just as a third one, since you asked me a top 3, it's a little self-serving. But I think the idea that I got Mike Williams in essentially my second to last pick, just a little secret, I always say my last pick for the kicker. I know it's like a crazy strategy, right? But so the second to last pick, which is essentially what I view as my last pick, I got Mike Williams. Clearly he has injury issues, which is exactly why he dropped. I think his little status next to his draft, I don't know if it said questionable, it said out or something like that, so I think that helped him fall. But if you just look at his stats, over the last 2 years, about 100 catches combined, 1,700 yards and 12 TDs. Like, that's pretty good production. Usually, like, my last pick in the draft is, like, some flyer, rookie running back that, might play out of the Wildcat offense or something like that. So to get a guy that has that type of production, and then obviously the potential, like just his skill set is very high. I thought it was surprising that did fall so far.
Speaking of second to last picks in the draft, I'd have to go back and look at the board, but I am 99% certain that I got AJ Brown last year in the and
How'd that
round
turn out for you?
decent. I mean, it's
Yeah.
yeah. So like, it's just kind of crazy that those sort of things that happen. You know, especially in a this league and this draft is just so different than anything else I've ever played in, and from everything else that I hear from everybody else, it's the same. You know, a lot of leagues are the same. You get redrafts and things, and this is just so unique and so different that it definitely takes some time to figure out where you want to sit and what your strategy is going to be. So, okay, jumping into some draft grades. Now, keep in mind, this I spent a little bit of time on this, but nothing super crazy. This was more of a fun thing. Wanted to throw my 2 cents out there for whatever it's worth, just to maybe even get some people talking. I always receive very positive feedback from the people that actually listen to this thing, and I just think it's something fun and unique we do in the league that other leagues do not. So I threw together some draft grades. I'm always looking for different things to talk about. It's always easy to get in and be like, oh, the week one, this person plays this person, and like that gets old. So just looking for different things. That's why I think I'll pick different times to do these little podcast things. Based around things that kind of happen in the NFL and significant events and things like that. So I just went in order of the actual draft and how we picked. First up, Matt Mongel. As I said, he came in. There was a glaring need at running back. He was only sitting on Montgomery. Montgomery's been banged up already in camp, and we knew this kind of heading in, so there was a chance that he wasn't even going to have the services of David Montgomery in Chicago for the first week or two. And he comes in. I think he does what everybody expected him to do. Takes Edwards-Helaire, and I think that's the pick to make. So no problems there. And then we already briefly touched on this, so I won't beat a dead horse. But Will Fuller at 2 was a head scratcher for me. With the news about Montgomery and getting Helaire, which I think will be fine, and I think he's going to be the bell cow for the most part. Fuller at 2 didn't make a ton of sense. There were enough running backs out there that you could get one that would be serviceable. But like I said, maybe Matt knows something I don't know, and Will Fuller's going to, take that next step in his career progression, and he's going to now become a true number one and be able to do the things that I personally said that he couldn't do. And then I just kind of looked down through his team, and I don't know. I guess if you want to call Will Fuller the number one, I kind of still call him the number 2. They brought Cooks in. I think Cooks is supposed to be the number 1. It doesn't have one number 1 receiver. And outside the top 2 running backs, all of his other running backs are backups. So he didn't go out and grab another starter, even though it's, and like off the top of my head, I don't even know how many were available. Maybe a handful, but maybe they just weren't the most sexy, attractive. Maybe it was an AP, maybe it was somebody like that. So overall, I'm going to give it a D. When I look at the team, he already had some receivers in place. He added some more receivers, which gave him some depth. But I still think there's a big hole at the running back position. And then he had, I think, actually he had 2 quarterbacks already, I believe, if I remember correctly. He had Brady and somebody else were kept for him, and then he was able to draft Joe Burrow, which I like that pick. I mean, I personally believe that dude is going to be very, very good. So I can't doubt you for that. That's just obviously one of those players that you're probably going to have to sit on for a few years before you reap the benefits of Joe Burrow.
I'll say I think a D is a little bit harsh. I don't love the Will Fuller picker either, but again, Justin Jeffries in the 3rd, Joe Burrow. Somebody had to make that step to reach out and get him. I liked it at that position. Robbie Anderson in 6, Jerick McKinnon. Everybody was like on his nuts last year, and then he obviously tore his ACL and was out for the year. So to get that dude at 7, I don't think it's a terrible draft by any stretch of the imagination. I think D is a little bit rough.
Okay. And honestly, oh shit. Sorry, I went too fast. We've done these things in the past, so yeah, like I'm definitely not picking on anybody or trying to. It just sucks. Like so many times I do this, and I'm like, all right, everybody gets a B.
That was my problem.
Yeah, it's like so hard to do. So like I just try to like mix it up a little bit, and and you know, try to be a little bit different. I
For
guess
sure, yeah.
it
No,
was
yeah,
hard
you
for me to
definitely have
even
to
do.
stretch.
Like I didn't want to do, like I didn't want to be like, oh, you get a D, welcome to the league, like no. So yeah, I'm just trying to have some fun with it and just kind of go. I didn't want to think about it too much because that's what always gets me in trouble. When I start thinking too much, then I'm like, all right, that's probably a B. That's a B. So this is like knee jerk reaction, like looking at the people that they picked and just throwing something together. So next we go to your draft, and you definitely needed a little bit of help at running back, maybe. But quarterback, you didn't keep a quarterback, so like at some point I was looking for you to take that leap, based on things you said earlier, and getting stuck in the past with not having a good enough one. Um, and man, like this grade was so easy for you to give, based on the fact that like how much draft capital you had. You had so many picks. Like unless you went completely off the rails, like I don't, that would have been very difficult to mess that up. Um, I really liked what you did. I felt like you addressed all the team needs that you needed to. You added a lot of depth. You actually mixed in, depth, some veteran guys with some young guys. And in my opinion, I felt like you had the second best draft in the league. All those picks, man, and you and I talk, so I mean, I had an idea of some of the directions you were heading, but I think ultimately it worked out perfect. I,
Almost.
yeah, I feel like you've got to be happy with what you were able to do, right?
Yeah, I think that if I didn't end up with a good draft, it would be a major failure on my part. I had like 6 out of the top like 15 picks or something like that. So if I didn't end up with a good draft, that means I completely shit the bed. The one area that I think I don't know even know if it was my fault. I definitely wanted AJ Dillon. He was one of the guys I absolutely wanted going into the draft. So to have to give up a third and fourth round in order to trade you to, because you had picked him at the end of the second round, because that was going to be my next. I was like 2 picks later, and I was going to get him, and you took him, and I knew that it would have like ate at me if I didn't come away from the draft with them. So I gave up a bit much to get him. I think if I just get AJ Dillon in the third round, then like I couldn't have asked for anything more. It felt a little bit weird going tight end in essentially the first round, but it was my fourth pick.
Right.
So, it's almost like my fourth round. And then I got quarterback, which I usually like to wait, like I talked about with Hoover's team. But that was my fifth pick. So that was like essentially my fifth round. So at the end of the day, I couldn't feel too bad about going a little early at quarterback and tight end.
Okay, nice. Moving on to picks 3 and 4. So we have Eric's team. His team need was running back. He did not have a first round pick. That obviously makes it a bit tougher to get that potential future stud when you don't have that pick. At 3, he traded it in a deal that moved Frank up to that third overall. However, moving beyond the first round, yeah, you mentioned earlier he did rip off 5 in a row running backs. Obviously, he's going for the uh, you know let's see how many, let's throw them all at the wall and see which ones stick sort of mentality. Went running back heavy. I really liked the Zach Moss pick. I personally had Moss going in the third round, and he was definitely on my radar and somebody I was looking at. But Eric took a shot on a guy that he obviously feels good about, same as I did. Yeah, I never beat anybody up for that. We've all seen in this league, especially if there's a rookie you want, you better get him because they're not going to sit around anymore. I think the first couple years we did this, some of us were getting rookies early and some weren't, and now it's just to the point like this is rookie heavy like early, especially anybody that's in a good situation or a highly touted player. And I think overall, Eric added some nice depth as well as some youth and has some nice upside. I gave Eric a B on his draft.
Yeah, I'm looking at his roster now. Kenny Galladay, DJ Chark, T.Y. Hilton, Robert Woods. Like, that's a really solid core of wide receivers. You can't really blame them for going so running back heavy. And the analogy you made of like throwing everything up against the wall and see what sticks, I think that's kind of a good strategy because all you need is like one of those guys to be like, oh, snap. This dude had a breakout rookie year. Like, he is going to be a future stud. And now he's a keeper, and you drop the next four, and you just added a solid piece to your puzzle that you can build around.
For sure. So solid draft from Eric. Number 4 pick, Rich Boozy. I said this in the pre-draft rankings. I've liked Rich's team the last couple of years and what he's done. Last year was a really weird season. He had a season much like yours, Whitus, where he just couldn't win. The players were there, it seemed, and he just couldn't get it done. His team was fairly well rounded, and I just kind of felt like he was looking for a little bit of depth at the 3 main positions: quarterback, running back, receiver. I thought for sure that Rich would have went running or wide receiver first. I can't argue with him taking Akers because of we just saw 3 running backs come off the board. You're not getting Cam Akers in the second round. Like, you're just not
Right.
you're not gonna get him. So Rich wanted Akers. He went out and got Akers. So I just said that. Like, I'm can't argue with anybody for doing that and going after the guy they want. I just in my when I do these mock drafts and I kind of put things together, I picked the first 3. And then the 4th one was the first wrinkle, and I just didn't think that he would have went running back there. I actually had Rich taking C.D. Lamb. But he's able to get Jerry Jeudy, rookie wide receiver. You see how he does. James White, like, I know I hate that New England backfield, but if anybody gets their points, it's James White. Like, James White gets his. Like, sometimes it's Sonny Michel that gets a nice chunk, and sometimes it's Burkhead, and sometimes it's whoever else they have. But James White always seems to get his. So I think he can be frustrating to own, but being that I already said that Rich's team was already fairly well rounded, I think that's a good addition. And then Gesicki, I've heard nothing but good things out of Miami from him. I think he's going to do well. He's going to be a solid tight end for Rich. So the only pick that I didn't love is I don't know what to think about Cam in New England. I've said this before many times. I am just not a Cam fan in any way, shape, or form. And I already hate the Patriots, so it makes me hate him worse. So I just can't stand that guy. And but overall, that was such a later pick and something that was insignificant in the grand scheme of things that I didn't really think it mattered. I thought Rich had a nice draft, and I give him a B.
Yeah, I agree, and I wouldn't even argue if you wanted to bump the B up a little bit. I think every one of his picks are solid. A couple young rookies that you could easily get very excited for having, and then some. Even a guy like Debo Samuel. Like, I remember you talking before you had cut him. I was surprised to see that he got cut. I thought he was definitely keeper worthy. Now, obviously, he has a little bit of an injury bug that he's getting over right now. But at the end of last year, San Fran was like running their offense through him. They were just finding any which way to get that dude the ball. So I think he had a really nice draft.
Yep. All right. Moving on to picks 5 and 6. Bill was in the 5 hole. His team need was wide receiver, and he needed some running back depth, even though he did keep, I think, four running backs. 2 of them are handcuff situations, and so definitely needed some depth at running back and wide receiver. Number 5 overall, like I just said, I thought Rich was going to take C.D. Lamb at 4. He did not. So the fact that Bill was able to get him at 5, loved the pick. His round 2 pick, he went with Ruggs. Now, just personal belief of me, I don't think Ruggs is going to be anything in the NFL. He's fast in college. That doesn't translate to the NFL, as we've seen many times over. And the Raiders have done this before, right? The Darius Hayward Bay. They're always, let's get the fastest guy we can find. Like, well, first of all, you got Derek Carr throwing you the ball. Like, but we'll see. So I don't love the Ruggs pick. And then later in the draft, it just got a little weird for me. I looked down through there and I'm like, okay, Benny Snell, like back up to James Conner. I'm not a huge fan of Benny Snell myself. James Conner goes down. I think the Steelers are in trouble. We're probably throwing the ball a lot. But then he takes James Washington a round or 2 later. Like, he already owns Deontay Johnson. Like, what? I mean, typically you don't see, unless there's an injury situation, you don't see somebody carry two receivers from the same team. You know, occasionally you'll see a receiver tight end situation. So I like the top side of, or I like the first round of Bill's draft, but beyond that, it was a lot to, he left a lot to be desired there in my eyes, and I give him a C.
His wide receiving core used to be so outrageous.
Right.
And I almost feel like I kind of view his first two rounds as a combined one pick. Very similar to Eric doing the 5 running backs to begin with, just to see like maybe if one or two of them stand out. Like he needs some more core pieces. And if CD Lamb isn't the guy, maybe Ruggs is. If Ruggs isn't, maybe it's CD Lamb. He just needs another superstar running back or wide receiver to start building around. But I kind of feel the same way. Like just looking over his draft from top to bottom. I like the James Washington in the 7th round, but outside of that, it's just not a lot of guys that I would look forward to adding to my team this year.
All right, number 6 is Frankie. As we already talked about, very active. If he had he had some team needs, I think it would be running back, especially with Damian Williams opting out this year. Was a big weakness in my eyes when looking at his team. He made a lot of trades and made it possible for him to move back into the first couple rounds. Now, going to the first pick, I can't argue taking... Now, keep in mind, we know now that AP has gone to Detroit.
Right.
Which doesn't make me feel all warm and fuzzy about DeAndre Swift. However, at the time that I was putting this together and at the time of the draft, you can't argue with him taking Swift. It was either Swift or Akers, right? I mean, it's flip a coin, whichever guy you think you like or whatever situation you think you like.
And J.K. Dobbins, I think he deserves to be in that conversation.
Yeah, for sure. I think, actually, I mean, I guess the scenarios are quite similar for all three of those guys, for sure. And
the fact that he has the running back in front of Dobbins that I just traded him in the offseason, Mark Ingram.
Right.
If he would have went Dobbins, I could see that a little bit.
Mm-hmm. So then he takes Antonio Gibson. I believe that was later in the 2nd round. And now, obviously, in hindsight, with it's so weird. Like he drafts AP to go with Antonio Gibson in Washington. Then AP gets cut and goes to Detroit, and he has Swift too. So it like worked out perfect. And I tried not to take that into consideration as I was just trying to look at the draft. But that Gibson pick looks to be a really nice pick. I felt it was solid all the way around, especially with what he had. I think if he wasn't able to move back into those first couple rounds, I honestly think we might be talking about a D here, because I'm not sure what he can do. If you don't have the picks, like you can't really wow anybody and be like, oh, look at me. Like, so the fact that he was able to move into that round and get those guys, I think was big. And it was a big part of him doing anything, because he was missing some picks there in the middle. And then he was able to, swing in late and add some guys. So without all those trades and moving into that spot, I think this is a much different situation.
Frank had the least amount of draft capital. He ended up having like 4 out of the last 8 picks just because everybody else had finished the draft. He only had 4 picks going into the 8th round. So to come away with a B, I think is pretty good.
Okay. Yeah, I knew he was missing some in the middle. I didn't realize that he didn't have, he only had 4 up through the first 8. That's crazy. All right. Pick number 7. That was Lance. So team needs. I felt like Lance's team, we say this every year, he's pretty good all the way around. Maybe not terrific in one place, compared to another, but he's pretty well rounded. Wide receiver, I felt was an area that he could look at, and then depth at running back stood out to me the most. Later we found out he attempted to move up, he did move up into that first round to get Michael Gallup. Yeah. And you take Gallup with one of your 84 picks, and then he snags AJ Green, which I didn't hate. You're already taking a guy like Gallup anyway. It's not like you were going after a rookie. Like, so you take AJ Green, the potential upside there is big with Burrow there slinging the ball. So didn't hate that pick at all. And then he has back-to-back picks in the 2nd, I believe, and he just filled some gaps, right? And like he takes Gronk, which, high ceiling situation there potentially. And then the 49ers D. He's the first D off the board. But, the number one ranked defense will go right along with the pretty good all around team that he already has. At the very least, I think we can be looking at Gronk getting red zone looks. I mean, I initially was like, oh, he'll have a handful of touchdowns, and I'm like, honestly, I bet he has, above 5, and it's between 6 and 10. I just think it's a comfort thing for Brady. He gets in there, he's a big target. They say he's looking good. I think he added depth well, and I believe, in my opinion, this was the best draft in the GFFL. This right here was Lance's draft.
Oh well, and really, you could add Gallup to his draft. He ended up trading away Kareem Hunt, so I'm not sure how that would factor into, you know, he gave up a keeper to get another draft pick type of a thing, but he ended up getting Gallup. But I did feel kind of like because he had traded me to move up, and then I still ended up taking the guy he ultimately wanted. But at the end of the day, he ended up getting the guys I wanted, and I got the guy, or he ended up getting the guys he wanted, and I did as well. So yeah, overall, I thought it was a good draft. I'm a little bit surprised that you think it was the best draft, although I think getting not only the 49ers early, but the Rams later. I mean, that's like two of the top scoring defenses. Yeah.
I think so. When I was doing this and I was trying to like see which one was best and which was worst, it was hard to me because like you're not comparing apples to apples. Like I'm not comparing Allen's team to Lance's team and saying, well, he got this person. Like everybody needs a little something different, and I think the current standing of where I think the team is, in addition to the picks that they were to get, that were able to get was what I ultimately tried to do, and this is the first time I've really done it like this. I used to use, when Dane was still here, I used to, use stats and like projected stats compared to previous stats and like, and that's just too much work. Like I don't have time to do all that. So like this was just sort of off the cuff, I guess. And I think with Lance's team is already pretty good. If you remember last year, he was able to get Nick Chubb. He's got a really good running back and some solid players already. So
yeah, Nick Chubb is actually the second best running back on the Browns, so I think that's a good player to have.
Next pick, which is I believe the 8th pick, Tim Boozy. Team needs a running back, needed some wide receiver depth. You look at Tim's roster and you see Royce Freeman there along with, no, not along with Lindsey, but in that Denver backfield along with Lindsey. You have to think that Royce Freeman's the odd man out, right? I mean, Melvin Gordon can do everything that both of them can do. But if anything, if either of them are a change of pace back, it's got to be, in my eyes, it's got to be Philip Lindsay. So I feel like we're just waiting for, something to happen here. Somebody get banged up, and Denver's going to be on the horn trying to get rid of Royce Freeman. I could be wrong about that, but I just don't see how much of a role Freeman's going to have unless Melvin Gordon continues to stay banged up, then maybe. And as I already said, I was a bit confused about the Jarvis pick. I thought that there were maybe better options there, but maybe not. Maybe that was just a best available situation. I really like the John Brown pick at 2, and you kind of changed my mind on that. I went back and looked at his stats and just saw just how consistent he was last year for you.
Dude, I had John. Man, he every week I would be like, oh, do I play him? Do I sit him? I got this other guy, and every week I was like so happy that I played him. He got so many targets, and he'd have like eight targets in the first half. I'm like, you know what? I just got to keep him in my lineup, and then I cut him at the end of the year.
The thing, another thing was a little weird to me. Like I said, moving into this, I felt like running back was the team need for Tim. And he didn't address the running back situation until round 6.
Yeah,
so
that's
like,
pretty surprising.
A lot of good, decent backs were taken between rounds 1 and 5. I know that the top end guys, in the first round you weren't able to get, but you had your pick of quite a few backs, and maybe it was just a situation that he didn't like any of those backs or felt like there was better value at the picks that he took. I mean, whatever. He did add some really nice depth at wide receiver. That's one of those things that you can have 8 great wide receivers, but picking which 4 you should play every week is. Can be difficult. So overall, I gave Tim a C.
Nice. Hey, I actually have to go. I apologize, guys. I wish I could have held out for the entire episode here. I'm sure Becker will be able to bring you guys home, but I got some family situations, so I gotta head off. But I do want to make. I'm looking ahead at the next person here, and it's Hoover, and I really want to kind of make note. Not only did he wait so long to get a quarterback, which I think will significantly hurt him, and not that his roster was like in dire needs by any stretch. He's got one of the better rosters in the league, but to go Ronald Jones, who I personally strongly dislike, and then to go Keyshawn Vaughn, thinking that you're going to end up with one of those guys, only for them to sign Leonard Fournette. Man, I mean, I just feel like. And then his next pick was the Ravens, and then Deshaun Jackson. I feel like Deshaun Jackson in the 5th round is really your first draft pick that you're going to use at all. I don't know. Again, he's got such a strong roster. It's you can only talk shit against the best guys. You can only punch up, and that's what I'm doing now. But I think this offseason was not good for Hoover.
Okay, very good. Later, Whitus, thanks for helping out. I'll take it the rest of the way from here.
Sounds good, man. Thank you.
All right, so yeah, Hoove. I looked at you're looking at running back just because, for one, everything I hear out of Jets camp is that Le'Veon just looks like shit. I mean, I don't know what his deal is. I don't know if he's hurt or if it's just an attitude situation. Which, if I had to guess, and being that many of us are Steelers fans, and just seeing how Le'Veon kind of handled the situation down the stretch here with the Steelers, it's probably a situation where he's piling on Adam Gase and wants to be the focal point. And, well, when you run like you did last year, nobody really cares what you think anymore. But, needed running back help and a QB. And we already talked about the QB thing. And now you get, I didn't beat Hoover up over the Ronald Jones pick because, what else is he going to do? Right? There wasn't a ton left. And he's already, it's not like he necessarily needs these things. He's just looking for somebody to potentially. So I do think it was a premeditated thing. I'm going to take Ronald Jones and then I'll grab Keyshawn Vaughn. And like Whitus just said, maybe one of those guys sticks. He added some decent depth at receiver, snagged a good defense in Baltimore. As I already said, hated the decision at quarterback. I feel like a top-notch quarterback really puts this team over the edge. I feel like with his receiving core and if his running backs are what they're supposed to be, a good quarterback, like a top 5 quarterback is just devastating to opponents when playing Hoover. And then, like Whitus said, what a gut punch, man. Fournette leaves, gets cut from Jacksonville, and then the Bucs pick him up. Man. And then, Arians came out and said, Rojo's our guy. Rojo's our guy. Yeah, Rojo's your guy until Fournette picks up the offense, and then Rojo's not your guy. Let's just get that clear. Ronald Jones has been in the league, came out of USC, he's been in the league for 2 years, did next to nothing his rookie year, and then last year had an opportunity to carry the ball a little bit more and really didn't do much at all. So I gave Hoover a C on his draft. Next, we moved to Allen. Team needs were wide receivers and draft picks, really. This has kind of been Allen's MO, and it's hard to, like what I said, I mean, there in the past, there's always been teams that I've just generally disliked when I looked at the roster, and Steve-O is traditionally one of those teams. Usually it's not that much anymore, but usually I don't like Steve-O's teams, and Allen has, now proven me wrong for a few years. He came in and he was, like Whitus said, super aggressive and made all these moves and did all these things that I just did not like at all. And yet, here he is. He cashed last year, took 3rd place. So, and his team continues to get better. He continues to improve on what he already has. I mean, he already has 2 of the best quarterbacks in the league. He's got Lamar. He's sitting on Josh Allen. Keep in mind, this draft grade isn't so much as far as me necessarily not liking it. I guess the lack of picks makes it nearly impossible for me to give him a good grade. Allen just didn't have any picks, especially top end picks. He didn't have any picks in the first few rounds. So what can I do? There's only so much he can do too. So it's not like he's making a decision between CeeDee Lamb and Henry Ruggs. He just didn't have any picks. So the lack of draft picks makes it nearly impossible for me to do anything much with a grade. But then he takes Damian Harris, with his first pick that he did have, and Preston Williams. Those were the top 2 picks. And then I believe I just read today, this didn't go into the decision making, but I think Damian Harris got put on the IR or something. So he's out for the beginning part of the year. Allen, much like Hoover's team, Allen's team is already good. We'll see what tricks he has up his sleeve. He's always I assume that all of us will hear from Allen at some point about some sort of trade or something that he thinks of that he's going to, make a move and try to make another run at this thing. So, I mean, as far as draft grades go, I gave him a D, but mainly just because there wasn't anything to base it on. There was, a few picks, but they were later, and and then obviously he filled in his picks late. But yeah, it was just tough for me to give him a grade. And last but not least, Steve K, last year's runner-up. Team needs, I felt like receiver, running back depth were the two things that he needed the most. As I mentioned earlier, I really liked the McCole Hardman pick. I felt like that was a great pick, and I did think in a couple of the mocks that I did think that Hardman was gone prior to that point in the draft. So the fact that he was able to get him at 11, I think is good for Steve-O. I thought that Steve did a great job at taking the best of what fell to him. I'm not sure that Steve-O is one of those teams too. There's nothing that he needs. There's nothing that he has to have this position or he's not going to make it sort of thing. So I thought he did a great job of taking those guys that fell. I guess we'll see how it plays out moving forward. But this is a good team. Didn't have to do anything crazy, and he didn't. I liked Steve's draft overall. I give him a B. And then myself, briefly, I needed just wide receiver and running back depth. Obviously I won the championship last year. My team's pretty strong. I was just looking to add some depth where I could and try to maybe sneak another young guy in there that'll be productive for me and hope to continue to stay on top as long as possible. I did trade back. I took AJ Dillon. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do there, to be honest, and didn't really need anything. I felt like I was able to do a pretty good job at wide receiver to add myself some depth there. I don't, as I already spoke on a little bit, I'm not sure how that Denver backfield will look outside of Philip Lindsay. I wasn't crazy about any of my running back picks that I currently have, so I give myself a C. All right, odds and ends. Couple things before we get into, and I'm not going to spend a ton of time on the predictions. I already did it last time, and I spent a lot of time on it. You'll see, I added those into my new ones, and we'll get this wrapped up as this went a little bit longer than what I thought it would. Anyway, one of the things I wanted to throw out there, and this isn't something that I'm bringing up because I think we should do it. This is just, my mind's kind of always racing about this league and what we can do to make things better or more fun or just keep the best that I can. And one of the things that we did talk about when initially pitching this whole dynasty league or keeper league, whatever you want to call it, was redrafting divisions potentially. I don't know. At some point you guys can talk to me about this, shoot me a text, whatever, send a message. I want to say that we said we were going to do it after 3 years of the keeper, and I can't remember if we ever brought it up. Maybe we did. Maybe we already voted on it and it was shot down. Is this something that we want to look into? Is it something that anybody's ever thought of, or oh man, it'd be cool if I was in a different division? I personally do not think we should. As always, if people in the league wanted to put it up for a vote, I'm all in. Let's do it. But it was just something, like I said, it kind of crossed into my head, and I'm like, man, did we actually talk about that? I personally like the divisions the way they are. I think it builds some rivalries. It also allows teams from being necessarily, held down because they always get a bad draw and put in a division with a couple tough teams or something like that. When you're in a division the same time, you play the same teams, you know what you're up against, you know what you're battling against, how to dig out. And I'll tell you this, Bill had a stranglehold on our division from Jump Street when we started this thing. And man, I think 2 years ago was the first time I ever won the division, and I felt almost equally as good about that as I did winning the Super Bowl last year. Is I finally won the division. I knocked him off his throne, and I know Whitus and Steve-O have some rivalries going on, and like I said, just something I wanted to throw out there. So, also last time we talked about this, I did talk about an app called Discord. It's mainly used. It's a PC, or a computer-based app that is like a chat / voice rooms, and it's used for a whole lot of different things. People hold meetings in it, but it's mainly used for gaming purposes, I think. where groups of people get in and play the same game and all talk and that sort of thing. Uh, However, White just brought up a good point. The Sleeper app works pretty damn good. We seem to talk in there more than we do the GroupMe app anymore. So I did create a Discord server for the GFFL, but now I'm sort of second guessing whether we even need it. The only thing that Sleeper doesn't do, I don't believe, is like if we ever wanted to have like a voice meeting where we all kind of connect through our computers and sit down and chat and be able to do that. Discord would be the way to go. But I already have my own Discord server for gaming purposes. I could always just throw everybody in there if we needed to. So just kind of thoughts on that. So far Sleeper's growing on me. I was a little worried about it there last year, and they seem to be really hitting their stride and doing good things. I guess would anybody be against deleting the GroupMe app? I personally don't use it as much as I used to. I kind of still throw it out there in case some people look at it more than Sleeper, but I tend to get Sleeper alerts, all the time, and it seems to work just fine. So just kind of wondered your thoughts on there. Um, and as always, I just wanted to thank everybody for playing. I love this league, and I know there's quite a few of you that feel the same way. We're all paid up. Everybody's all good to go except for Tim, which it's all handled. Tim apparently got hacked, and he had to create a new PayPal situation. So there's no worries there. I just wanted to bust Tim's balls a little bit. So it makes my life so much easier, and this was just sort of something I set up a long time ago. I don't think you should ever start a season without having everybody's money. I mean, so many times I hear horror stories about guys in leagues and the money's not collected, and somebody doesn't pay, and then nobody's paying out until somebody pays, and it's just silly. So the fact that you guys always get paid up for me right away, and I don't have to hound anybody for any money. It also allows me, you guys all paying through PayPal. I keep all the money right in my PayPal, and I'm able to pay it out the same day. As soon as somebody wins, I just send you your money, which is really cool. So thanks to everybody. And here we go. This is the last part of it. I'm going to kind of go a little quick through here. This is my predictions from the last podcast. So the last podcast that you see on the very left-hand side over here under round one, this is where I projected the finish and the seeds. So I had Hoover as the 1 seed, myself as the 2, Allen at the 3, Steve-O at the 4, and then the best team to not win the division I felt was going to be Tim Boozy, with Rich in the 6 hole, Whitus in the 7, Lance at the 8. I had Hoover, Tim, Rich, and myself moving on to round 2, with Hoover and Rich going to the championship, and Tim and I falling to the consolation. I had myself winning 3rd place and Hoover taking a championship. So post-draft, I made some changes. I left Hoover in the 1 hole. However, I don't feel as confidently about it as I once did, based on what I just said about the draft grades and that sort of things. So I think the race tightens up, but I still think Hoover's team is good enough and will win that 1 seed. I left myself in the 2 hole, and then I did a little flip-flop in here. So I had Steve and Allen 3-4, or Allen and then Steve 3 and 4, and I have now switched them, and I moved Steve to 3 and Allen to 4. And the reason is this. I am predicting that I think Allen's division between Allen, Lance, and Tim gets very scary. I think all 3 of those teams are really good, and I think overall those are the 3 best teams combined, to like all be in the same division. I think that division as a whole is the toughest division. So I actually think, although I think Allen will still win the division and Allen's team is very good, I think that those 3 teams beat each other up a little bit, and it's going to lessen Allen's record just enough that Steve-O's going to take that 3 hole and Allen takes the 4. I now had a change. Last time, as you can see, I had Lance in the 8 hole. I also had Lance and Tim both making the playoffs, with Tim's team actually getting the 5 seed. I've sort of flipped on that now. Post-draft and looking at rosters and things, I think Lance, as I said, I thought Lance had a really nice draft and really positioned himself well. So I have Lance taking the 5 seed. A team that I had not making the playoffs in the first set was Frankie. I didn't think his team was good enough then, and now after all these trades, he's able to add Aaron Rodgers and all the things that he did, was able to move into the first round and get some of those rookies. I think Frank's gonna stick around and end up making it into the playoffs. I think Rich falls back just one spot and falls into the 7th seed. And then I think Whitus, instead of being the 7th seed, will be the 8th seed and round out our top 8. Now, out of those, round 1, those are the round 1 matchups that I just said. I have Hoover beating Whitus in the first round, Lance upsetting Allen in a divisional rivalry. I have Steve beating Frank in round 1, and then Rich with the upset over me. And then I have Lance knocking off Hoover as well, going to this championship against Steve-O, who is the 3 seed. And then the consolation will be Hoover versus Boozy. I have Hoover winning 3rd and Steve-O winning another title. Okay. And before I jump into that, the last thing I am going to talk about was just briefly wanted to talk about the week 1 matchups, and I did a quick little rundown prediction. Nothing too crazy, just because of the fact that, you know, in week 1 no one really knows what to expect. I'm not sure anybody knows what to expect when we didn't play any preseason games. We didn't do any of that stuff, so it's kind of hard to predict. Okay, here we go. So week 1, we open up division rivalry, myself and Bill. This is kind of, Whitus mentioned it earlier when he was in here. You know, Bill's team for many years was just so good, and like nobody wanted to play him. And over the years here, it's sort of deteriorated as Antonio Brown kind of fell apart and that whole thing. But now he's got Patrick Mahomes. Like, that doesn't make it easy to deal with at the quarterback position. I think that I have him beat elsewhere, but this is definitely a matchup that, you know, for whatever reason, even when my team was not very good, this was one team that I always seemed to have an edge on for whatever reason. But I think I am able to jump out to a good start here and get the win. I think Bill beats me at quarterback and keeps it close at receiver, but I think at the end of the day, I win everywhere else, running back, tight end, and defense. I say 118, 101. I go to 1-0. Matchup number 2, Eric versus Matt. 2 of the newer guys in the league. I think this will be maybe the closest game of the week. I think Eric jumps out to 1-0 start, gets a good start to his season, predicting 95-92. Matchup 3, Battle of the Boozies, the Boozy Brothers. I think Little Bro takes down Big Bro in this one. I think it will be close, and I think both of these teams score pretty well. I predict 111-108 Tim to beat Rich. Tim goes to 1-0 in the season. And in the second half of games, we got Hoover versus Frank. I think Hoover edges Frank this week, goes to 1-0. Hoover's wide receivers are tough to deal with week in and week out, and I think that's ultimately going to be the deciding factor in this one. I got Hoover 106, Frank 101. Lance versus Allen. I just got done talking about how good I think Lance's team is going to be and where I predict them to go and all these things. However, I just don't think that... I don't love Lance's matchups this week. If anybody, I think he might have some tougher ones, or just ones that were just weird for me to predict, I guess. So I think Allen gets out of the gate 1-0. I think it might get a little out of control just based on the fact that I didn't love Lance's matchups. I say 129-105 Allen. And in the final matchup of the week, what has become quite the little rivalry up in that division, Steve-O and Whitus tangle up. And at first glance, when I first looked at this, I thought it was going to be a landslide. I thought Steve-O was going to kill him. And then the more I looked at it, the more I found some points in the back half of the roster, secondary receivers and tight ends and defenses and even kicker. And I think Whitus actually makes it closer than my initial thought. I think Steve-O does get the win and go to 1-0. I got a 109-106 victory for Steve-O. So that's it, boys. That's all I had. I just wanted to make sure I got this out there for you guys. Good luck to everybody this season. And as always, you ever have any issues, any problems, any questions, everybody's got my number. Get a hold of me. Give me a call, and we'll deal with it. Thanks, boys. Later.